Now, on the 20th day of the second month, in the second year, the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle of the testimony, and the children of Israel set out for the first time from Mount Sinai to a journey through the wilderness to travel to their destination, the promised land. Here is how the standard of Israel set out. The standard of the camp of the children of Judah set out first according to their armies. The army of the tribe of Issachar and the army of the tribe of Zebulun followed. Then the tabernacle was taken down, and the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari, the families of the Levites, set out carrying the tabernacle. Then the standard of the camp of Reuben set out according to their armies. The army of the tribe of Simeon and the army of the tribe of Gad followed them. Then the Kohathites, families of the Levites, set out carrying the holy things. The tabernacle would be prepared for their arrival. The standard of the camp of the children of Ephraim set out according to their armies. The army of the tribe of Manasseh and the army of the tribe of Benjamin followed the tribe of Ephraim. Then the standard of the camp of Dan, being the rear guard of all the camps, set out according to their armies, the army of Asher and the army of Naphtali that followed. This was the order of march of the children of Israel, according to their armies, when they began their journey. The children of Israel set out for the place of which the Lord was to give them. They departed from the mountain of the Lord on a journey of 3 days, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them for the 3 days' journey to search out a resting place for them. Oh well, the mixed multitude was at it again. They got the children of Israel to remember when they were back in Egypt. The people complained again, and the Lord heard it, and it displeased him. His anger was aroused so that the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the people in the outskirts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. Now the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt, those that were among the children of Israel, yielded to intense cravings, so, the children of Israel also wept again and said, Who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic, but now our whole being is dried up, there is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. The people were tired of eating manna. Manna was like coriander seed, and its color like the color of bdellium. The people went about and gathered it, ground it on millstones or beat it in the mortar, cooked it in pans and made cakes of it. Its taste was like the taste of pastry prepared with oil. When the dew fell on the camp in the night, the manna fell on it. Now the people wanted something else to eat, they wanted meat, and they wanted it so bad that they rejected the food the Lord sent them from heaven and desired the food they had eaten in Egypt. Then Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, everyone at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was greatly aroused. Moses was also displeased and became frustrated in dealing with the people and their complaints, that he prayed to the Lord to be released from the burden of the people. He, himself, quickly forgot what the Lord had already done, and he needed not to have worried about how he was going to feed them meat. He forgot that he was not alone, for the Lord was with him, and that he needed not to think that the burden of carrying the people was all on him. Besides, the people were not complaining against him, but they were complaining against the Lord their God. The Lord had Moses to gather to him 70 men, elders of Israel, who were elders of the people and officers over them. Moses was to bring them to the tabernacle of meeting to stand there with him, and the Lord would come down and take of the Spirit that was upon him, to put the same upon them, that they may bear the burden of the people with him, that he may not bear it alone. The people consecrated themselves, for the next day they would eat meat. Not only the next day they were to eat meat, not 2 days, not 5 days, not 10 days, or 20 days, but also, they were going to eat meat for a whole month, until it came out of their nostrils, and it became loathsome to them, because they had despised the Lord and had wept before him, saying, Why did we ever come out of Egypt? It was hard to believe that enough meat could appear to feed 600,000 men on foot, and especially in the wilderness. Even Moses doubted the Lord even after seeing what the Lord can do. The Lord said to him, Has the Lord's arm been shortened? Now you will see whether what I say will happen to you or not. Moses went out and gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tabernacle. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to Moses and took of the spirit that was upon him and placed the same spirit upon the 70 elders. When the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, though they never prophesied again afterward. There were 2 men who were among the men of the elders listed, but they remained in the camp, that had not gone out to the tabernacle. They were Eldad and Medad, the spirit rested upon them also, and they prophesied. Joshua, Moses' assistant, envied them and wanted Moses to forbid them. However, Moses said to him, "Are you jealous for my sake? Oh, that all the Lord's people were prophets and that the Lord would put his spirit upon them." Moses and the elders returned to the camp. Moses, not knowing yet, that he spoke into existence the outpouring of the Holy Spirit upon all the Lord's servants. He hoped that the Spirit of the Lord rest upon all his people. In Joel 2 verses 28 and 29, the Lord said, "And it will come to pass afterward that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh, your sons and your daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions, and also on my men servants and on my maid servants, I will pour out my Spirit in those days." Those days are now, and that day began at the day of Pentecost. When the day of Pentecost had fully come, the apostles with the women and Mary the mother of Jesus and with his brothers, these all continued with one accord in prayer and supplication. Suddenly there came a sound from heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where Jesus' disciples were sitting. Then there appeared to them divided tongues, as of fire, and one sat upon each of them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and they began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. Today, true Christians receive the Holy Spirit after receiving the Lord Jesus into their heart. Now the Lord sent out a wind that brought quails from the sea, and they were flopping near the camp about a day's journey on one side and the other side, all around the camp. The people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day and gathered the quail, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. But, while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. The people the Lord struck, who had yielded to craving, were buried in that place. Afterwards, the people moved from Kibroth Hattava to Hazeroth and camped at Hazeroth. Moses married an Ethiopian woman, and Miriam and Aaron spoke against him. They said to Moses, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also?" The Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. The Lord immediately had Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to come out to the tabernacle of meeting. When they were at the tabernacle of meeting, the Lord came down in the pillar of cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam. Both of them went forward, and the Lord said to them, "Hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision, I speak to him in a dream. Not so, with my servant Moses, he is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings, and he see the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" So, the anger of the Lord aroused against them, and he departed. When the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, Miriam suddenly became leprous, as white as snow. Moses cried out to the Lord to heal her. The Lord answered him and had him to shut her out of the camp 7 days, and afterward she was to be received again. Therefore, Miriam was shut out of the camp 7 days, and the people did not journey until Miriam was brought back into the camp. After Miriam's 7 days, she was received back in the camp, and the people moved from Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran, arriving at their next destination from Mount Sinai. Now a man from each tribe of the children of Israel with their leaders among them was sent to spy out the land of Canaan in which the Lord was going to give them. They were to spy out the land to see what it was like. They were to see whether the people who dwelt in it were strong or weak, few or many. Whether the land they dwelt in was good or bad, whether the cities they inhabited were like camps or strongholds, and whether the land was rich or poor. They were to see whether there were forests there or not. They were to bring some of the fruit of the land, for it was the season of the first ripe grapes. The men went up and spied out the land of Canaan from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. They went up through the south and came to Hebron, Ahiman, Sheshai and Talmah, and the descendants of Anak were there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. The men then came to the valley of Eshcol, and there, they cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes, they carried it between two of them on a pole. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The place was called the valley of Eshcol, because of the cluster, which the men of Israel cut down there. They returned from spying out the land after 40 days. The men returned to the wilderness of Paran, at Kadesh where Moses, Aaron, and all the congregation of the children of Israel was camped. They brought back word to them and to the entire congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. They said to Moses, "We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. But the people who dwell in the land are strong, the cities are fortified and very large, and we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan." Caleb quieted the people before Moses, and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." However, the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." Therefore, they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." This was the bad report the men gave to the children of Israel who went with Caleb to spy out the land. The giants they saw were descendants of Anak. Then all the congregation of Israel lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. They quickly forgot that the Lord was with them, and they needed not fear the people of the land, for their protection had departed from them. However, they rebelled anyway against the Lord. All the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt! Or if only we had died in this wilderness! Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" Therefore, they said to one another, "Let us select a leader and return to Egypt. Wow, these people will never learn to believe, and this will cause this generation to never enter into the promised land of Canaan." Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. But Joshua and Caleb, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, "The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread, their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." After Joshua and Caleb said this, all the congregation wanted to stone them with stones. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will these people reject me? And how long will they not believe me, with all the signs, which I have performed among them? I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they." Then Moses said to the Lord, "Then the Egyptians will hear it, for by your might you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you, Lord, are among these people, that you, Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands above them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and in a pillar of fire by night. Now if you kill these people as one man, then the nations which have heard of your fame will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring this people to the land which he swore to give them, therefore, he killed them in the wilderness. Now, O I pray, let the power of my Lord be great, just as you have spoken, saying, the Lord is long-suffering and abundant in mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he by no means clears the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Pardon the iniquity of this people, I pray, according to the greatness of your mercy, just as you have forgiven this people, from Egypt even until now. The Lord listened to Moses and he said, I have pardoned, according to your word, but truly, as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all these men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now these 10 times, and have not heeded my voice, they certainly will not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor will any of those who rejected me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land where he went, and his descendants will inherit it. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valley, tomorrow turn and move out into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron saying, how long will I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me? I have heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me will fall in this wilderness, all of you who were numbered, according to your entire number, from 20 years old and above. Except for Caleb and Joshua, you will by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. However, your little ones whom you said would be victims, I will bring in, and they will know the land, which you have despised. But as for you, your carcasses will fall in this wilderness, and your sons will be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and bear the burden of your infidelity, until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness. According to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you will bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you will know my rejection. I the Lord have spoken this. I will surely do so to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they will be consumed, and there they will die. The men, whom Moses sent to spy out the land, returned and made the congregation complain against God, by bringing a bad report of the land. Those very men, who brought the evil report about the land, those 20 years old and older, would die by the plague before the Lord in the wilderness. However, Joshua and Caleb would remain alive, of the men who went to spy out the land of Canaan. The people that rebelled against the Lord were given a death sentence. They would wander in the wilderness for 40 more years and would never get to see the land that the Lord was to give them. They would all die by a plague before the Lord. Every rebel would fall in the wilderness because he chose to rebel rather than to believe the Lord. Now, Moses told these words to all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. They rose early the next morning and went up to the top of the mountain, saying, Here we are, and we will go up to the place which the Lord has promised, for we have sinned. Moses said to them, Now why do you transgress the command of the Lord? This will not succeed. Do not go up, unless you are defeated by your enemies, for the Lord is not among you. The Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and you will fall by the sword, because you have turned away from the Lord, and the Lord will not be with you. Nevertheless, the people presumed to go up to the mountaintop. Neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses departed from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that mountain came down and attacked them and drove them back as far as Hormah. After this, rebellion is about to rise again. Korah, a Levite, with Dathan and Abiram the sons of Eliab, and the sons of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. They gathered against Moses and Aaron, and said to them, You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? When Moses heard this, he fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and all his company saying, Tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his, and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. That one whom he chooses he will cause to come near to him. Do this, take censers Korah, and all your company, and put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow, and it will be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. And Moses said to Korah, Hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to serve them, and that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi, with you? Are you seeking the priesthood also? Therefore, you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. What is Aaron that you complain against him? Then Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram the sons of Eliab, but they said, We will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us? And you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. Then Moses was very angry, and said to the Lord, Do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them. Then Moses said to Korah, Tomorrow, you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they, as well as Aaron. Let each take his censer and put incense in it, and each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer. Then every man took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. So, Korah gathered the entire congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to the congregation. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Then they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, will one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation? Then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, Speak to the congregation saying, Get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He spoke to the congregation saying, Depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs unless you be consumed in all their sins. Therefore, they got away from around the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents, with their wives, their sons, and their little children. Moses said, By this you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Now as Moses finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. Therefore, they and all those with them went down alive into the pit, the earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, Lest the earth swallow us up also. Then a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, Tell Eleazar, and the son of Aaron the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy, and scatter the fire some distance away. The censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar. Because they presented them before the Lord, therefore they are holy, and they will be a sign to the children of Israel. Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers, of those men who were burned up had presented. They were hammered out as a covering on the altar, to be a memorial to the children of Israel that no outsider, who is not a descendant of Aaron, should come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he might not become like Korah and his companions, just as the Lord had said to him through Moses. Now on the next day all the congregation of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying that they have killed the people of the Lord. And it happened, when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron, that they turned toward the tabernacle of meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. And Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. So Moses said to Aaron, Take a censer and put fire in it from the altar, put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun. Then Aaron took it as Moses commanded and ran into the midst of the assembly, and already the plague had begun among the people. Therefore, he put in the incense and made atonement for the people. He stood between the dead and the living, so the plague was stopped. Now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incident. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, for the plague had stopped. Now the Lord was going to rid himself of the complaints of Israel that they made against Moses. He was going to do this by choosing one of 12 rods from among the 12 tribes of Israel to blossom and yield ripe almonds. A rod was taken from each father's house, all their leaders according to their father's houses, 12 rods. Each man's name was written on his rod, and Aaron's name was written on the rod of Levi. There was one rod for the head of each father's house, and they were placed in the tabernacle of meeting before the testimony, where the Lord met with Moses. The rod chosen of the 12 by the Lord would blossom. Moses spoke to the children of Israel, and each of their leaders gave him a rod apiece, for each leader according to their father's houses, 12 rods, and the rod of Aaron was among their rods. Moses placed the rods before the Lord in the tabernacle of witness. The next day, Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and the rod of Aaron of the tribe of Levi, had sprouted and put forth buds, produced blossoms and yielded ripe almonds. Then Moses brought out all the rods from before the Lord to all the children of Israel, and they looked, and each man took his rod. Aaron's rod was put back before the testimony, to be kept as a sign against the rebels, that Moses may put their complaints away from the Lord, unless they die. The Lord said to Aaron that he, his sons, and his father's house with him would bear the iniquity related to the sanctuary, and he and his sons with him would bear the iniquity associated with his priesthood. Aaron was also to bring with him his brethren of the tribe of Levi, the tribe of his father, that they may be joined with him and serve him while he and his sons were with him before the tabernacle of witness. They were to attend to his needs and all the needs of the tabernacle, but they were not to come near the articles of the sanctuary and the altar, unless they die, they and he also. They were to join with him and attend to the needs of the tabernacle of meeting, for all the work of the tabernacle. However, an outsider was not to come near him. He was to attend to the duties of the sanctuary and the duties of the altar, that there might be no more wrath on the children of Israel. The Lord himself had taken his brethren the Levites from among the children of Israel. They were a gift to Aaron, given by the Lord to do the work of the tabernacle of meeting. Therefore, he and his sons with him were to attend to his priesthood for everything at the altar and behind the veil, and he would serve. The Lord gave Aaron's priesthood to him as a gift for service, but the outsider who came near would be put to death. The Lord had also given Aaron charge of his heave offerings, all the holy gifts of the children of Israel, he had given them as a portion to Aaron and his sons, as an ordinance forever. This was his of the most holy things reserved from the fire, every offering of theirs, every grain offering and every sin offering and every trespass offering which they render to the Lord, would be most holy for Aaron and his sons. Aaron and his sons were to eat it in a most holy place, and every male could eat it. It was holy to him. The Lord did not give Aaron an inheritance in the land of Israel, nor was he to have any portion among the Israelites, for the Lord was his portion and his inheritance among the children of Israel. Now the Lord gave the children of Levi all the tithes in Israel as an inheritance in return for the work, which they performed, the work of the tabernacle of meeting. The children of Israel were not to come near the tabernacle of meeting any more unless they bear sin and die. However, the Levites were to perform the work of the tabernacle of meeting, and they were to bear their iniquity. It was to be a statute forever, throughout their generations, that among the children of Israel they were to have no inheritance. For the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offered up as a heave offering to the Lord, he had given to the Levites as an inheritance. Therefore, he had said to them, among the children of Israel they will have no inheritance. When the Levites took from the children of Israel the tithes, which the Lord had given them as an inheritance, they were to offer up a heave offering of it to the Lord, a tenth of the tithe. They were also to offer a heave offering to the Lord from all their tithes, which they received from the children of Israel, and they were to give the Lord's heave offering from it to Aaron the priest. Of all their gifts, they were to offer up every heave offering due to the Lord, from all the best of them, the consecrated part of them. When they had lifted up the best of it, then the rest was to be accounted to the Levites as the produce of the threshing floor and as the produce of the winepress. They could eat it in any place, for it was their reward for their work in the tabernacle of meeting. They would bear no sin because of it when they had lifted up the best of it. Nevertheless, they were not to profane the holy gifts of the children of Israel, unless they would die. The ordinance of the law, which the Lord had commanded, was that the children of Israel bring Aaron and Moses a red heifer without blemish and without defect and on which a yoke had never come. They were to give it to Eleazar the priest, so that he can take it outside the camp, and it was to be slaughtered before him, and Eleazar the priest was to take some of its blood with his finger, and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times directly in front of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the heifer was to be burned in his sight, its hide, its flesh, its blood, and its offal was to be burned. The priest was to take cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet, and cast them into the midst of the fire burning the heifer. Then the priest was to wash his clothes, he was to bathe in water, and afterward he was to come into the camp. The priest was to be unclean until evening. The one who burned it was to wash his clothes in water, bathe in water, and he was to be unclean until evening. Then a man who was clean was to gather up the ashes of the heifer and store them outside the camp in a clean place, and they were to be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for the water of purification. It was for purifying from sin. The one who gathered the ashes of the heifer was to wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It was to be a statute forever to the children of Israel and to the stranger who dwelt among them. As for an unclean person, they were to take some of the ashes of the heifer burnt for purification from sin, and running water was to be put on them in a vessel. A clean person was to take hyssop and dip it in the water, sprinkle it on the tent, on all the vessels, on the persons who were there, or on the one who touched a bone, the slain, the dead, or a grave. The clean person was to sprinkle the unclean on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and on the 7th day, he was to purify himself, wash his clothes, and bathe in water, and at evening, he would be clean. But the man who was unclean and did not purify himself, that person was to be cut off from among the assembly, because he had defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. The water of purification had not been sprinkled on him, and he was unclean. It was to be a perpetual statute for them. He who sprinkled the water of purification was to wash his clothes, and he who touches the water of purification was to be unclean until evening. Whatever the unclean person touches would be unclean, and the person who touched it was to be unclean until evening. Today, we do not live under the Mosaic law, where the blood of bulls and goats from the sacrifices made on the Day of Atonement would atone for people's sins. Whenever we become ceremonially defiled by touching anything unclean, the Lord Jesus purifies our heart, mind, and soul. He purifies the inside of us, not just our outward actions and emotions. Jesus, the Christ, came as high priest of the good things to come, that is, we have access to the Father, with the greater and more perfect tabernacle not made with the hands of man, that is, not of this creation. Not with the blood of goats and calves, but with Jesus' own blood he entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. If the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifies for the purifying of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Jesus, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse our conscience from dead works to serve the living God? As for this reason, Jesus is the mediator of the new covenant, by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance. If this video was a blessing to you, please like, subscribe and share. Thanks.